Today's episode is brought to you by Larosse Media Incorporated. They make professional videos to fit any budget, so next time you need a commercial, promo, or corporate video, think Larosse. Check them out at larossemedia.com. Hello and welcome to the Stinking Albatross Podcast. My name is Alissa and I'm here once again with my partner in crime, Scott Hayward. How's it going, Scott?
Good, Alissa. How are you?
Pretty good. We just can't stick to a schedule if our lives depend on it, eh?
No, well, our lives depend on other people's lives, little tiny people's lives, and so they basically dictate our schedule. So why don't we start with that? Because you have some happy, good news to share with everyone. I'm sure most people who listen to this podcast already know, but yeah, why don't you dive right into that?
Oh, that I had a baby?
Yeah, the little teeny tiny piece of news.
Yeah, he's literally 1 month today. So his name is Jack, and he was born on March 19th. And pretty unconventional birth in that it was very type A, planned to a T, mostly painless. Very modern birth, I would say. It was sort of funny because
For a modern woman.
exactly. It was funny because I was induced, and so when I went to the hospital originally at the time scheduled and went to the back, and they put this Foley in you, which is like this little balloon, and it gently expands until you're 3 centimeters dilated. And they're like, okay, go home now and come back when it falls out. But they were like, first, we want you to give this urine sample. So I go to the bathroom and it falls out like immediately. So then I come back and I'm like, okay, it's fallen out. And then they're like, oh, well, we're not ready for you yet. So just go have lunch somewhere. So it's like, okay. So Aaron and I, we went to a pub and had some lunch and came back and, got the drugs and gave birth. So it was good times. But yeah, it was the nurse who originally had me, she had just come back from an 18-month maternity leave, and she was really hoping that I gave birth before 7 p.m. because that's when her shift ended, and she really wanted to see like her first birth since she's been back. But unfortunately, I didn't start pushing until 9 o'clock. So hopefully she
You
got to
started
see
pushing at 9 in the evening, and then what time was he born?
oh, like 9:25 or something.
Oh,
So
wow. Yeah,
yeah.
super quick.
Yeah. I technically had like a small hemorrhage, but it was nothing too bad. He was 8 pounds, 12 ounces, so pretty big. And he gave me a road rash, but I'll just leave it at that. That's what the nurses called it. So
Enough
healing
on
was
you
a little bit
already.
slower. But I mean, I kind of knew because every time I got an ultrasound, which was regularly, like every 2 weeks kind of thing, they would say, "Oh, he's a football baby. He's a big baby," and his father is a big man with very broad shoulders. So I knew that eventually, if I kept having kids, this would catch up with me, and it finally did on the third one.
But yet, this was the easiest one. It's easy. It's at home now that you've had it for a month. This is the easiest baby so far.
Yeah, like people always tell you the different transitions and what they think is the easiest. For me personally, the transition from 1 to 2 was the most difficult.
Mm.
But I think because my second baby was just difficult in general and still is sort of.
He,
But
he had a rough go, to be fair to him.
yeah. So the transition from 2 to 3 has been very easy, I think. You're way more comfortable, way more confident. You have a lot more stuff. So if you need like that extra, maybe, costly thing that you would have originally gotten, it's not a big deal because you have everything already. So just to spend, like I got this sleep sack that was really expensive. That was like $120, which I never would have gotten before, but I'm like, it makes him sleep so much better, so I can splurge a little bit on things like that because I already have clothes and diapers and everything already. So, yeah, it's been pretty good so far, and he just sleeps and eats and does his thing.
Be quiet.
Yeah, pretty chill. I think mostly because he's so big, it like takes a lot of energy to like move his body at this point, so he's just rather rather just sleep.
Yeah.
The thing too, I think, is like sleep deprivation. I think after your first, you're like, okay. For me, when I had my first, I was like really excited. So when I
Hmm.
woke up through the night, it was a big deal. It was just like this really amazing, cool thing that was happening, and the endorphins kind of kept me going. And then with the
Yeah.
second one, it was way more difficult because like I wasn't used to it, and I didn't have those first timey endorphins anymore. But the third time, I'm just expecting it. I know it. I know what to expect. I know it's short lived and that kind of thing. So the sleep deprivation hasn't gotten to me. It's not too bad. And also, he sleeps better than my second baby as well. But I mean, getting up every 2 hours is not. It's doesn't. It's not making me be crazy or forget things or just be a zombie. Basically, it's no big deal for now.
Yeah, and like in your second one there, he had a real rough go because of the skull issue, right? Like it was
I don't know what
when
it
he
was, honestly. Like that wasn't even, I don't even know if that even affected him. It was just, yeah, he just was just a ornery, fussy baby. And he wasn't colicky, but he just was an
no,
unhappy. Yeah, he just was super fussy and uncomfortable a lot of the time. So I don't know what was going on there, but I'm glad it's over. And yeah, he only slept for like 45 minutes at a time. So that was, that's a big
yeah.
difference. I felt like I was in jail and they were torturing me by like blasting music every half an hour or something. Because I
No,
think that's a legitimate form of torture.
2 hours in between, at least you can get like a REM cycle in.
Yeah, I
And
think
so,
so. Yeah, like I,
yeah,
I
so
wake up and I feel fine.
if you're doing, like, 3, 4, 5 2-hour shifts throughout the night, and then in
Yeah.
between it's a little bit. I say this honestly with no experience because my wife breastfeeds, so she's the one that gets up. And our second one, much easier, slept throughout the night, much longer, a
Mm-hmm.
lot quicker than our first. So I would suspect that, yeah, the transition from 2 to 3 would probably be, I think, easier than 1 to 2.
Mm-hmm.
Which actually we're recording this in the evening, and it's a different background because I'm at my parents' place because our kids aren't in bed yet, and they're kind of loud, so I didn't really want the screaming in the background. But yeah, well, congratulations to you and Aaron. That's really exciting news.
Thanks. Yeah, it's been good.
Yeah.
You just went to
Well,
Saskatchewan.
yeah, no, I've been on the road while you're having babies. I've been on the road trying to get out there and encourage people to save as many babies as we can. And this was a conference I spoke at back in 2018, and it was quite a bit of fun. And I met a lot of great people, and we got a lot of people in our database in Saskatchewan that have just been absolutely stellar since. A couple of leadership races, a couple of elections, a provincial election coming up, and I was invited to come and speak at the Saskatchewan Pro-Life Association. They have their annual general meeting for all the different pro-life groups across the province. They get together in one location. It changes at 3 or 4 or 5 different places every year. But they also like to have a little convention along with their AGM. Their AGM business is only about a couple hours on the Saturday afternoon. But on this was all in one day. In the years past, it's usually been the whole weekend. They'll have different speakers from across the country, across the province, come in and speak on different things, which I think is absolutely fantastic. It gives a reason for people to come, and they do a really great job at it. So this year was in Saskatoon, and I headed up there a couple of weeks ago, and it was a pretty great turnout for because this was the first one they had in person since the COVID-19 restrictions lifted.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have it last year, and I think because you basically a lot of people that didn't have their stuff last year for their first one since 2019, I've been told is because it takes a year to book a place and all that type of stuff. So this was the first year that they did it, and I will say, Alyssa, that for the past about a year and a bit, I have gone to different pro-life events that have asked us to send either you or myself to them to speak at, to meet with people. And I talk with the organizers, and they basically tell me almost universally that the very first year that they come back since the COVID-19 restrictions, they have like 80, 85, 90% of the attendance that they would have beforehand, which is really great to hear. Obviously you want it to be just as well attended as beforehand, and if not more, but you got to start somewhere. And hey, I think starting at 85%, what your average was beforehand is a really great place to start. And that's from my understanding is, and kind of from being speaking there in 2018 and now speaking there in 2024, I think that's where they were at. So, um, yeah, the people that were there, obviously, like if you're driving from across the province to come hear a few different people speak and take care of your AGM business for your umbrella organization, they're very active. They want to do things. They want to do things in the province, and um, kind of oddly enough, we don't talk about our organization a ton on this podcast, which kind of saying it aloud is kind of weird when you think about it. You think that we'd have like maybe a weekly update or something on it, but we only talk about it every once couple of episodes of that. But Saskatchewan has always been really good to us, and I think we've been really good to them. Um, our goal as an organization, for people out there who don't know, and this is we're pretty public about this, is we want to make sure that we have 1,000 supporters with their names and contact information in every single federal riding right across Canada. And we're, a ways away from that, but we're well on our way. And in the province of Saskatchewan is the first province where we have several hundred supporters in every single federal riding. And when I go to the SPLA conference, and they have, especially when it's in Saskatoon, which is of course very central in Saskatchewan, and you have people literally from every corner of the province, and I recognize people and they recognize me. And even though I haven't seen them for a few years, we're chit-chatting because they've been volunteering for us for a few years and they're introducing me to new people and all that type of stuff. It kind of hits home to like, oh yeah, like our strength in Saskatchewan is quite high, and I don't think that's so much on us, although I think we have a little bit to do with it. But it's definitely a testament to the people there. And the last thing I'll say about it before I hand it back to you and step away from the buffet here is I find because there were other people that were at this conference speaking, right? It wasn't just me. There was Amanda Ackman, who we really hope to have on this podcast sometime soon because she's doing great work with the Canadian Physicians for Life when it comes to the issue of physician-assisted suicide. She was speaking some stories that she's had experienced and speaking with people across Canada, a little bit around the world, but especially across Canada, very, very heartfelt, hard, and some heartwarming as well. Mike Shooten from We Need a Law was there as well. He's been doing a lot of work on this file as well for assisted suicide because of it's really affected his family. For people who don't know, Mike was a good friend of ours with We Need a Law. Was it a year ago, Alissa? Last year or 2 years ago? His son Marcus just graduated high school and died of cancer. So him and his wife have testified before parliamentary committees in the House of Commons, maybe Senate as well, on the expansion of assisted suicide. Obviously, speaking against it from their testimonial and everything that their son went through excellent, excellent, excellent palliative care. So he spoke on that a little bit, as well as some of the abortion-related stuff that they're doing. And Jake Clausen from National Campus Life Network and getting things started up on campus again, which was really, really interesting. I want to have him on as well because from what he is telling me, what things are like on campus, it is night and day from compared to before COVID-19 restrictions. So anyway, speaking with these people, we all kind of concluded that some of the other issues that I think preoccupied a lot of our supporters. Of course, we share supporters, not the exact same supporters of all our organizations. Um, have more or less completely subsided, most especially the COVID-19 issues. And I think that's really good and really positive. It's good not to dwell on those things. I'm not saying, for those of us that were against, the severe restrictions to, ever really forget that. But at the same time, they're gone. They're no longer with us, for the most part. But abortion most definitely is. You have crazy people in Quebec that are pushing for assisted suicide for, infants. Never mind those with mental health issues. So, these are very real fights. They're very life and death, and they're on our doorstep. And we're taking the right steps to fight against them and slowly and surely being successful. So, all in all, it was a really great weekend. Always love visiting Saskatchewan. I got to remind them that they had two losing seasons of 6-12 for the Riders, and that the Bombers went to the Grey Cup 4 times. I mean, lost the last 2 times, but that I believe is a league record to have a starting quarterback 4 times in a row in a Grey Cup, being Zach Collaros, who Saskatchewan traded away to Toronto right before he came to Winnipeg. So I know we'll talk about sports later, but I had to get that in there. It's springtime here, and even though we had snow come through Calgary and Brandon for a last day and a bit, I am starting to get a little bit of football fever. So anyway, that is my report from Saskatchewan.
Awesome. Yeah, I always love going to Saskatchewan. Really good people there, and probably the province that has the most pro-life politicians,
Yeah,
federally at least. So, just you know, get the last couple ones that are lingering, and just make the whole province completely pro-life. We will talk about a Saskatchewan story later on, but first, let's talk about our first topic, which is the fact that, and you've been talking about this a lot lately, and I know that this is something that you wanted to bring up, but we're going to make a little bit of a comparison between what's happening in the U.S. and what's happening in Canada, because what's happening in the U.S., especially with regards to the presidential primary, is really interesting because Donald Trump will clearly win, and he has oscillated a lot about on his abortion position. So, as we know, prior to when he was president, he nominated some very good pro-life Supreme Court justices, which resulted in the overturning of Roe versus Wade. But now I feel like he's sort of trying to shake that off. And he's kind of using, like, it's like him and Pierre like go out for tea regularly because he's using
go out
Pierre.
for tea. I'm sure that's what they're drinking.
Could you imagine them just with their little cups? The visual. But they have their little tea time because they're using the same talking points. And so Trump recently said you must follow your heart on the abortion issue, but remember, we must also win elections. So he said that abortion should be left up to the provinces. Where have we heard that
States.
before when it comes to anything, basically? And then he also said that a total ban on abortion is a political loser, and he does not support any federal legislation to stop abortion. I'm not sure if he make comments on the recent Arizona
Yeah.
provincial legislation.
So what happened in Arizona? So what's been happening in the States? By the way, to give a bit of a background to our listeners and viewers, is in Canada, the United States, we had two Supreme Court rulings in our respective countries, 15 years apart. So in 1973, the Supreme Court of the United States, all men, by the way, had ruled that different states cannot have uh, bans on abortions up until either 21 or 24 weeks gestation. So it was the first time that the terminology of trimesters really came into the common parlance. Before that, people didn't really talk about trimesters, so they split up a pregnancy into 3 different months, 12 different weeks, more or less. For the term of pregnancy, they said so. Different states, like, hey, if you want to ban abortion after either 21 or 24 weeks gestation, that's fine. If you don't, that's fine too. One big difference amongst many between Canada and the United States is that in Canada, our criminal legislation comes under the purview and the jurisdiction of the federal crown, and that's in the British North America Act in sections 91 and 92. In the United States, each state is responsible for their own criminal justice system. So there's no real kind of overarching federal criminal legislation. More or less in the United States, there are different federal crimes, and that's where organizations like the FBI come in. But by and large, is mainly left over to the states, including things like
Definitely.
homicides and car thefts and um, things of this nature, and of course including abortion. So that's what their court ruling had said. Our court ruling had said that the legislation passed in 1969 by the Pierre Elliott Trudeau government, which said that each hospital in Canada would set up what's called a therapeutic abortion committee made of 3 physicians, and any woman who wanted an abortion had to go to this committee and present the case as to why she thinks she should have an abortion. And if 2 of the 3 physicians agreed with her, then she would get an abortion at that hospital. Well, some hospitals, their therapeutic abortion committees were more or less rubber stamps, like in downtown Montreal. And other hospitals, like on the entirety of Prince Edward Island, not one single hospital had a therapeutic abortion committee. And so in the Morgentaler ruling, which was a very, very divisive ruling and had multiple different opinions written from different justices, even justices who ruled on the same side. They basically all said that, listen, this law as is written is not being evenly applied because some hospitals in Canada don't even have a therapeutic abortion committee, and others it's just whatever you want goes. So that ruling in Morgentaler, in the RV of Morgentaler, basically said, this law is trash, it's terribly written, we're going to throw it out. We have some suggestions of what we think a law would work. We're looking at different places around the world, but really it's up to you, Parliament, to come up with a law within a year. And if you don't, then we're not going to write it for you. So abortion is neither illegal or legal. So we just have this legal void in Canada that the federal Parliament has yet to answer. So two very, very different rulings, two very, very different situations. In the United States, in the Dawes decision in June of 2022, because Donald Trump had a point nominated and then they were elected or confirmed, pardon me, through the Senate committee votes for justices to the Supreme Court of the United States. In the Dawes ruling, they had basically overruled Roe v. Wade and declared it null and void and said each state can pass any sort of abortion legislation that they want to. So in the state of Arizona, the pro-life Republican majority in their legislature passed it is a heartbeat bill, right? So it's basically a total abortion ban. No, sorry, it was that, and then I believe that's what they passed. I could be wrong on that. Producer Dave would have to check me on that. But what prosecutors were doing, what they were prosecuting in 1864, I believe, law that was in Arizona, which basically said abortion is illegal in the state except if the life of the mother is in jeopardy. And so the Supreme Court, that was taken to the court in the Supreme Court of Arizona, the state Supreme Court had ruled this is fine, this law stands. And so Trump was asked about this about a week ago or so, and he said that it went too far. Those were his words, said that the court ruling went too far, that the governor and the Republicans in Arizona should work on a, quote, more reasonable law. So, yeah, I think there's a few different issues at play here. I'd like you to jump in, Alissa, a little bit before I go on a really long tirade about this. But yeah, kind of what are your thoughts about this? What do you think is happening with the political pro-life movement in the United States, and particularly their relationship not only with the Trump campaign, but also with, I think, the Republican Party in general, writ large?
Yeah, I mean, the Republicans and maybe Trump have seen that despite the fact that Roe v. Wade has been overturned, the different states have been passing very expansive abortion legislation, and the pro-life movement has had a lot of losses in that regard. So perhaps he thinks in order to win some of these swing states, he has to have a more balanced or neutral view on abortion, whereas prior that wasn't the case, that wasn't happening. It was very extreme in the other direction for the pro-abortion side. So to have a pro-life position was a winnable position in the prior election, but now he thinks, I'm seeing these losses state by state, so I need to kind of win voters on both sides. And that's always the irony, is that you never win voters on both sides by having these like neutral balanced positions. And we've talked about
It's
this
off both sides.
extensively with regards to what's happening in Canada, because the left is never going to forget that you appointed these pro-life Supreme Court justices that overturned Roe v. Wade. They will never forget that, no matter what you say or no matter what legislation you do or do not pass. And conversely, the pro-lifers and the conservatives are going to feel betrayed, and they're going to feel like you lied to them, you flip-flopped, you Aaron O'Tooled them, and that might also potentially affect voter turnout, because they won't be as
Mhm.
enthusiastic to support him as they were prior. So I just think it's a lose-lose situation. I'm not sure why politicians always tend to try this balancing act, but it never works. And if Trump does win the election, it will be because people think Joe Biden is completely incompetent, and not because of any sort of weird quote unquote balance position on abortion that he thinks he may have. And I think the same goes with Pierre here in Canada as well.
Yeah, it's interesting because in the United States, you have several ballots on one ballot, right? You vote for the president, and then you vote for your senator, and then you vote for your representative for your district in the House of Representatives, and then you vote for your state senator and your state representative and counties, and then all the way down in some counties, all the way to the dog catcher, right? So sometimes it can be a very long ballot, but you can vote Republican, Democrat, Democrat, Republican, Republican. Like you don't have to vote for, one political party or whatever all the way down ballot. And if there's someone that you want to vote for that isn't on your ballot, you can write a name in. It's known as a write-in. I don't know if I were American and if I had a ballot, what I would do when it comes to the presidential ticket. Like if I had, Marco Rubio or Ted Cruz as as my Republican candidate for Senate, like obviously I would vote for them. If I had a Republican, or I don't even care if they're Republican or Democrat, but if I just had a pro-lifer from one of the two major parties in these different positions, I would obviously vote for them in those positions. But now to me, because in the United States, a president doesn't introduce legislation. A president doesn't sit in the legislature, right? It's not like typically our prime ministers are usually members of parliament. They are a vote in the House of Commons, so it really matters if they're pro-life or not. Obviously, it matters if they're pro-life or not for you know chairing the cabinet meetings and basically having a control on cabinet and things of this nature. And yes, the president does chair the cabinet in the United States, but again most secretaries of the cabinet in the United States, if not all of them, are not members of Congress. They don't have votes on legislation. So all a president can do when it comes to legislation, I mean, they can propose things to different congressmen or congresswomen to write, but they can't actually move anything. All they can do is veto. They have the power of veto. And so if Donald Trump is saying, I'm going to veto pro-life federal legislation, that's the exact same position as Joe Biden. And I'm sorry, but we already have a pro-life majority on the Supreme Court of the United States. That much is obvious. So you can't really promise that to me. I don't think there are really any vacancies probably coming up, maybe one in the next term. And even if that were replaced, a pro-lifer replaced by a pro-abortion justice, you still have a pretty decent working majority on the Supreme Court of the United States. So if I'm American, like I wouldn't want to send a message to Donald Trump and the Republican Party. I would very seriously consider doing a write-in. Personally, for me, on a very personal basis, I actually more or less agree more with Joe Biden's foreign policy than Trump's foreign policy as of today. Maybe that changes. I don't know. So yeah, like that would be tough. But one thing I do want to say, Alyssa, is to kind of riff off. And by the way, sorry, it's also kind of crazy that on like the one thing that you can do on legislation federally in the United States, Donald Trump and Joe Biden have the exact same pro-abortion policy. It's just like Pierre Poilievre and Justin Trudeau, the exact same pro-abortion policy. The parallels are very, very, very uncanny.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and again, like you could make the argument here that Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives are polling so high and are likely to come into office, not so much because there's this big love in for Pierre as there is this big anger toward Justin Trudeau. If you look at a lot of the polling, yes, the Conservatives are at 40%, the Liberals are at like maybe 25%. And you look at Justin Trudeau's approval numbers, or they're minus 35 or something like that. But you look at Pierre's approval numbers, and they're hovering around 1, 2, maybe 3%. Like net, like it's not like there's this huge margin that Justin had going into that election. But one thing I kind of want to talk to you about, Alyssa, is, and I know that we're going to have our friend Jonathan on about this because he actually is American because he technically is born in the United States, so he can vote down there. And I know that he's a lot closer to our American pro-life allies in the United States. But it kind of like I just remember this time when you and I went down to the Leadership Institute in DC. By the way, because we have a bunch of elections coming up federally and provincially, any candidate that's listening to this, watching this, you want to go to a campaign school or a campaign manager for that matter to learn how to fundraise, to learn how to door knock, to learn how to communicate well, social media, all that type of stuff. Go to the Leadership Institute boot camp for a week. It's totally worth your money. It's totally worth your time. Highly, highly recommend it. So you and I went in 2017
The
after
Koch
the
brothers who specifically fund our
yeah, that's
organization
right.
really want you to go.
I totally forgot about that. That the very pro-abortion Koch brothers,
Yeah.
yes, wanted us to go. Which is so funny because there are so many pro-lifers down there that work there at the Leadership Institute. They have pro-lifers come through. Who was that congressman that was in your breakout group for that one session?
And Crenshaw?
Yeah. Yeah, I totally forgot about that.
Yeah.
Um, anyway, so we were down there and we had my vehicle. So we had supper with a director or manager, forget the title, of basically like our shadow organization, sister organization, whatever you want to call it, that basically does what we do in the United States, which is Susan B. Anthony list. And had us over for supper, very lovely, all that type of stuff. So we got talking, business, of course, and we were kind of picking his mind, right? Because we were fairly new at that point. We are only about a year and a half, not even 2 years old. And we're like, oh, wow, like, here's a guy that's high up in a pro-life organization in the United States that's been around for a while, very successful, that we're trying to emulate. And so in the year before, in 2016, they had a bunch of people out knocking on doors in key states. So Florida, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Michigan, I believe, and in key counties in those states. For example, in Florida, they were really, really targeting Miami-Dade. And so I was kind of asking him, like, what does that look like? What does that mean? So you knock on a door, what's said? He's kind of going through the script and what that would look like when you knock on a door and someone answers. And then he went through it when there was a pro-lifer. And so basically, what happens is you knock on the door, you talk to someone, you find out they're pro-life, you give them a card that says, go vote here this day at your local county office or whatever it is at your polling station, and that's it. You just walk away. Maybe you mark down that address as pro-life, maybe. So I said, oh, what about getting them to sign a petition? He said, well, what are you talking about? I'm like, well, they're pro-life. You're right there. Like, are you not going to get their name and contact information? And he said, no, we don't need that. And that has always said, we don't need that. And I thought that was absolutely bloody insane. And I don't know if you remember this, Alissa, but I remember we left his front door. We were walking toward my vehicle in the parking lot because he lived like in a townhouse complex. And I remember looking to you saying, we are all alone because there is no one literally in the world. If Susan B. Anthony List is not doing this in the United States, there's no one in the world that's going on doing what we were doing, which was knocking on doors, seeing if people will sign a pro-life petition on a very specific pro-life policy and building up a database. And I think it's come to bite them in the ass because they were so focused in the United States about getting rid of Roe v. Wade, which is step number one. There's no doubt about that. That's step number one. But in the wake of getting rid of Roe v. Wade, there was no thought. There was no unity. Like, as soon as Donald Trump had won that Republican primary in 2016, and he publicly said, I'm going to use the Heritage Foundation list of these 100 justices that you've proposed to me to nominate to the Supreme Court of the United States, which all 100 are pro-life. As soon as you knew that, as soon as you knew there was a scintilla of a chance that Roe v. Wade was going to be overturned in the next 5, 6, 7, 10 years, that movement should have been, what are we going to do in the wake of it? And they didn't really seem to have an answer. Here's a list of losses in the last, not even 2 years, in the last like 15 months alone in the United States. These are all ballot initiatives and basically referenda in these states. California, that's a loss. That's to be expected. Vermont, 2022, that's a loss to be expected. Michigan, that's not good. That's a loss. Kansas, Ohio, Kentucky, Montana. These are red states. These are deeply red states. All of them. Well, not all of them. Most of them. Obviously not California, Vermont, and Michigan. But so it's I think, like, as much as we revere the pro-life movement politically down in the United States, I think there's lessons to be learned for us here in Canada. They seem to be regressing to what we're trying to get rid of, and I think we are going to get rid of. I do believe that there's going to come a point, probably if we don't have another stupid COVID or something like that. I think there's going to come a point in the next 10 years or so where it's going to be really difficult, if not impossible, to win a Conservative Party of Canada or any of the small C Conservative Party nominations in any of the provinces if you're not pro-life. I think we're going to get to that point. In the United States, they seem to be going a little bit backwards because they were so focused on that one thing, getting Roe v. Wade. And I think a lot of their supporters and typical voters, and the fact that they're not building a database with them, with their contact information, I don't know if it was hubris or what. But yeah, that's kind of the way I look at it.
I also think that there's a lot of fear mongering in the US as well. Like when Roe v. Wade was overturned and then these different provincial ballot or state ballot initiatives were being brought up. In the media, they're saying, oh, you're going to be prosecuted if you have a miscarriage and all that kind of thing. So I
That
also
one,
think
it's
that
in
was
Texas,
part
isn't
of
it?
play.
That one commercial? Yeah.
Yeah, like I do think that stuff comes into play. So I think it's a twofold, like pro-lifers think, oh, we won, Roe v. Wade is overturned, and that's it. And then also people are getting more active because of the fear mongering on the other side. So those are two things that I think really need to be combated is the disinformation that's being spread about certain ballot initiatives, as well as pro-lifers understanding that Roe v. Wade was not the end; it was just the beginning.
I also think that you have to take in some states, because there's 14 states that basically have more or less a total ban on abortion. And they're usually heartbeat bills and or heartbeat laws, and they're not going to go anywhere in those states. But that's only 14 states, right? Take Texas for example. Like if you're a female in West Texas in 2023, it's much easier to just go over the border and get an abortion in New Mexico than it was in 1973. So um, while it's great to see 14 of the 50 states to have solid legislation, I don't think in a lot of states that that's the piece of legislation that you start with, right? And I don't think they've had that conversation because they've been so used to having pieces of legislation that we're trying to push provincially here in Canada, things like defunding abortion, mandatory ultrasounds, mandatory counseling, mandatory waiting periods. So you request an abortion, but the abortion doesn't occur for at least 72 hours afterward. Parental consent, parental notification. I mean, these are all initiatives and laws in the United States that substantially reduce the abortion rate. But now that they're looking at, the criminal side, I think they need to look more at a place like Poland, for example, where, you've increased the number, or you've increased the you've passed more and more pro-life legislation with regard to their criminal code, while also in a place like Poland increasing, and this is something that's rarely talked in the United States, increasing the actual support specifically for women, especially women in really, really, dire situations. Because I believe that, it's a 1-2 punch. Uh, you have some states where you have ballot initiatives that are going for a total, abortion ban, or trying to get this in their constitution, things of this nature. And I don't think that's the way to go. I think I think you still have a lot of states where you have a lot of work, where you need to convince a lot of people to get there. But I also think that most, if not all states, you have probably a place where you can say you can have an abortion ban dealing with pain capability, for example, right? I think you could pass that probably in most states, and I believe pain capability is the first step to get to heartbeat legislation. One, you say have heartbeat legislation, it's more or less a total abortion ban anyway. But yeah, I just don't think they thought about that. These are things, by the way, for people who are listening. These are things that we talk about, not just within our organization, but with people within other organizations, like We Need a Law, for example, CCPR, about, once we build toward that and get that pro-life majority in our legislatures, federally and provincially, what are we going to do with it, right? Because it can't just be a total abortion ban right off the bat. You want to work toward having a law, such a law that you've reduced abortions more or less to nil. But it's as we're seeing in the United States, it's very difficult to do that right off the bat in most places.
Yeah, and I also find it really ironic that the mainstream media in Canada is constantly making comparisons between Pierre and Trump. And there are a lot of comparisons, but not in the way that they're
Yeah,
talking about. It's actually the opposite, and this is one of those ways, and the fact that they are very similar, if not the same policies on social issues, specifically abortion, as their um, competitors, as the liberal or Democratic leaders do. So yeah, Pierre is like Trump, but it's because of not because of how pro-life he is, but because of the opposite. I
yeah.
also think it's really odd
They
too
they
because
moved they moved closer together in the last week. They're closer together now than they were 3 weeks ago.
and their leaderships are interesting because people are so like they sort of have this cult following. So
Yeah,
they didn't really need to rely on any specific groups for support. They just had this sort of kind of cultish following that they still do, and just and because of that, they seem to be more willing to walk all over certain groups that they may have had to court in the past. Not walk all over, but sort of disregard, I would say.
yeah,
Um, Groups that they would have, needed in the past. And I really think, despite the fact that they didn't need them to win their leadership or win their primary, I think they'll need them for support when they become leaders and presidents and prime ministers. So I think that is a is the wrong way to go, and you need to unite people and not divide them, and flip-flopping like this and not making strong stances on social issues, specifically ones that are very popular and written in your party policy, both in the Republican Party policy and in the Conservative Party policy, there's a lot of different pro-life policies, will not do you any favors. So definitely interesting to keep an eye on that and see where it goes and see if Trump flips again. So we'll see what
Well,
happens.
it's one thing about the two of them is that they'll never lead a parade, but their shows how jump to the front of it, right? Because a lot of people always forget that a lot of the COVID-19 vaccines that were manufactured in the United States under a Trump initiative called Operation Warp Speed. And as you can imagine, the whole point of Operation Warp Speed was to get these vaccines manufactured as soon as possible and get them distributed as widely as possible. And, whether you got the vaccine or not, I mean, the numbers are now very, very, very clear that the efficaciousness of the vaccine is basically nil. That's all thanks to, Donald Trump. And I think a lot of people forget about that because he saw where things, what he thought, at least he saw where things were going. And because, he's not a very principled man and he's a populist, that's what he did. And I think a lot of people would probably come to regret that. One other thing I want to say about this before we move on is, did you see Father? I don't think we're supposed to call him Father anymore, although once ordained a priest, always a
Well,
priest. Pavone's not tirade, but statement on what
I
Trump
don't
said.
watch anything that Father Pavone puts
No,
out.
no, it's cringy enough as is, but defending him, to the hilt, very embarrassing for someone who used to lead Priests for Life, which was a very, very strong pro-life organization that did a lot of good work in the United States. Um, like honestly, like the type of statement he issued, I would consider taking away from public ministry if I were his bishop, just based on that statement alone, because now you're declaring yourself to be more pro Trump than pro life, right? And in the minute that you're more pro someone else than you are pro life, and listen, there's reasons. Like I just not reasons, but there's ways to approach the issue that are different. Like, for example, you and I just talked about what really me talked about that, in the state of Ohio or in the state of Michigan, you know, I would not recommend to put forward legislation for a total abortion ban as the very first thing to do in the wake of Roe v. Wade, right? I would probably do something a little more gestational, a little more incremental, and working toward a better goal for everybody. But when you have someone who says, "I'm going to veto pro-life legislation," you're off my ballot. You're already off my ballot automatically. And so I think it's really important. This is also a lesson for us here in Canada to make sure that we are always more pro-life than we are pro-Pierre, pro-Justin, pro-Mark Carney, pro-whatever, pro-Scott, pro-Alissa. You're always more pro-life than you are pro anything else when it comes to this issue politically. And that's something that a lot of pro-life leaders in the United States are going to have to deal with over the coming months.
We live in a world that grows through communication.
Every connection comes from a dream to be heard and realized.
To welcome a better future. What are your dreams?
LaRosse Media will help communicate your vision through our professional video production services and marketing strategies.
Start building connections to your future audience. Visit larossemedia.com
and be sure to check out our extended service options.
Dream, produce, market, succeed with LaRosse Media.
Serving Canada from coast to coast to coast.
Moving on, there's a good story and a bad story with regards to assisted suicide that has come out in the news in the last few weeks. And we'll start with the bad, and it's bad, but it's also extremely sad. And there was a 66-year-old man named Norman Munier who suffered a spinal cord injury in 2022, which left him paralyzed, quadriplegic, with no function in his arms or his legs. So he was admitted to the ER in a hospital at Saint Jerome, Quebec, for a respiratory virus. And because there were no beds available that he needed, he was stuck on a stretcher for 4 days in the ER. And because of that, he developed a major pressure sore that eventually worsened to the point where bone and muscle were exposed and visible, which is just absolutely horrendous and so incredibly painful. I can't imagine that happening to anyone, but specifically somebody who's a quadriplegic. Like, they should be first in line or in the front of the line to get what they need, specifically, the mattresses and the beds that they need. And because he got this bed sore, he told his family and his partner that he didn't want to be a burden anymore, and he requested assisted suicide, and he was euthanized on March 29th, so just a few weeks ago, which is just, again, incredibly sad. Radio Canada spoke to him the day before he was euthanized, and it was just a very sad interview, very sad comments, and completely preventable, absolutely completely preventable. And also, like, the fact that his death wasn't reasonably foreseeable. He wasn't going to die from a pressure sore. It would have healed. It was very painful for him. But the fact that he didn't say, I'm in a lot of pain, I want this because of my mental or physical health. He's just kept saying he doesn't want to be a burden to other people, which is a big difference, despite the
You know
fact
what that suggests to me, Alyssa? That suggests to me that, and I'm not saying this was the case for sure, but I'm starting to hear a lot of stories about this. I'm sure when we ever have Amanda Ackman on, she would probably confirm this for me. I bet you that he got either that vibe, so to speak, or people told him just straight up in the healthcare system in Saint Jerome that he was being a burden. And because I know that some of the most rabid supporters of physician-assisted suicide are healthcare workers, because they they don't want to deal with them. It's just easier just to kill them to actually do the hard work of healing people. Or if they can't be healed, then making them as comfortable as possible, as they begin the dying process. And that's what that suggests to me. That, like, the fact that he said, I don't want to be a burden. And it's not like he became a quadriplegic only a couple of years ago, right?
Yeah.
It was from a trucking accident. So, like, just kind of getting used to this new state of life. It sounded like he had lots of, family support and things of this nature. So he probably went in, and maybe he got that said to him, because this was the third time he was in for a respiratory
It
virus.
certainly wasn't his family, because he had they partner in the story, but his wife or whoever he was with, she was his caretaker, and it seemed like she was doing an amazing job, and she loved him, and she was totally fine doing that, and she was getting the help that she needed, and it wasn't a family coercive thing at all. It was like, who are you a burden to? So I absolutely think that there's something to that for sure. We know through stories of other people who have overheard doctors or just been directly told that they're a burden, that's probably the direction it was headed.
Man, that you want to talk about? We were just talking about the criminal code. That should be something in the criminal code. Like, if you coerce someone to getting assisted suicide, and that's found out, whether through however it's proven in a court of law, like, you should be charged with manslaughter, really.
Yeah, so a lot of different ethicists and college professors, university professors are kind of going against this, saying that medical assistance in dying is more easily accessible than basic fundamental health care. And, we know that, but it's just good for that to be repeated. And I hope that less people have to feel like they're a burden, or less people have to die for this to be repeated more often than not, because the fact is that a lot of these people are not pro-life, they're not socially conservative, but even still they see the fundamental flaws that assisted suicide is having on our healthcare system and on vulnerable people in general. And I hope that the law protects them, and politicians and healthcare professionals will start to protect them even more, so that this doesn't happen any longer, because it is very sad, and there was no need for him to die, and there was no need for him to even get that pressure sore in the first place. So I'm glad that there's an investigation being looked into it. There were beds available that could have been provided. So there's clearly something going on there that I'm glad that it's going to be uncovered and hopefully resolved as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and I think let's do the good story. Let's do the good story then comment.
The good story, we did talk about this story a couple of weeks ago on our podcast where a Calgary father was trying to prevent his 27-year-old daughter, who was autistic and living with him, from committing assisted suicide. And so he got this temporary injunction. And then a few weeks later, the judge ruled that she could die by euthanasia despite the father's concerns. But the judge in that decision maintained a 30-day a stay of the injunction so the father could appeal. So even though the judge said you can do this, she made it so that there was a time period where the father could appeal that decision, which he did. And the justice in that decision then said, gave another injunction to prevent the death of this woman. So the date of the appeal will be in October, so she won't be legally able to die until this appeal in October. And it's looking, I think, good for the father. This is the second time that a judge has given the injunction.
The appeal was granted. The appeal was granted a hearing.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, okay. When you and I were talking earlier, I thought you had said that he had won the appeal.
No, the appeal was granted.
Okay.
And even though he was given the injunction twice now, even the judge who said that the 27-year-old daughter could commit assisted suicide still did it in a way which allowed the father to appeal. So
Right.
I think that this is a good thing. It shows that, we were talking before, the daughter was doctor shopping until she could find physicians who would then give her the recommendation that she needed. So she has nothing wrong with her. She's just solely autistic, and she has a good support system. Clearly her father is fighting for her life around every corner. So she has people who want to care for her, love her, want her to get better and survive if she's suffering through some sort of depression or mental illness or whatever. So I think this is good, and I think this will set a good precedent for future people who are going through similar circumstances. So as much as there was a negative story, we also wanted to update you on a positive one that's happening as well.
Yeah, I think it'd be really interesting to have Amanda on to talk about this, because we were talking about this over beers before her final presentation that evening. And I don't want to speak for her, but kind of the consensus around the room. I mean, this is something that we want, but we also need to be very objective about it. I think the feeling out there is that with all these crazy stories regarding assisted suicide in all parts of the country, and the fact that other people outside of Canada media are starting to notice it, and also in places like Belgium and the Netherlands, where they had these very, very liberal assisted suicide laws that are now starting to be rolled back more and more in those places. I know I've said this on the podcast before, but I'll say it again because I think it's important for people to hear this. I really do believe that we're getting closer and closer to the time, and you can expedite this through certain political campaigns, not just for political parties, but pro-life organizations as well. That people who supported assisted suicide, let's say in 2014, 15, or 16, when it was like 92-year-old grandfather has terminal stage 4 cancer, and he's going to die in 3 months, and it's going to be an awful, painful time. So let's just let him die now. I think those people who supported assisted suicide in that kind of context, I would not be surprised if maybe 1 out of every 2, I don't know, I have no numbers, I would love to see the stats on this, would now say today, yeah, that's what I supported and I still kind of do, but I've seen this just go way off the rails, and I think, what, let's just get rid of this and not allow this at all. I think we're getting closer to that point, and that's great that the Conservatives are against expanding it when it comes to mental health issues. But I think we need to grow a pair on this as well, and say, listen, we're going to pass legislation where assisted suicide is not going to be allowed in this country. And if the Supreme Court rules against it, then we're going to use the notwithstanding clause. Just like, say what you want about Doug Ford, but hey, you know what? He was the first premier to use it outside of Quebec for a really long time. And now premiers aren't as spared to use it. And there's no really big repercussions when, the majority of people are on side with you when it comes to crazy rulings like that. So
yeah, I wonder though,
that's where the Conservatives need to go.
Yes, but will Pierre go in that direction? Because it's not the Canadian public whose minds he has to change is Quebec caucus, who he's has to placate to, and are clearly very fervently in favor of assisted suicide. I can tell you that for absolute certain when we were at convention, on any major social issue, it was like the majority of the room on one side and Quebec caucus on the other, going to the mic and speaking in favor of virtually every against every social issue policy that was brought up. And as we all well know, that conservative leaders are always trying to placate the Quebec caucus, which is very irritating on many levels. So I think that's the holdup, not necessarily public opinion.
Yeah, I wonder, like, when let's say there are 230 conservative members of parliament after the next election, if the numbers hold. I mean, we still have 15 months or whatever to go, a little bit longer than that. And of the 230 members of parliament, conservative members of parliament, there's still only 10, maybe 12 from Quebec.
Yeah. They have less
Massive
power.
minority. Are they still going to hold that much sway?
Yeah.
Especially if we do our jobs, and so far, by the way, we are. And we're going to massively increase the number of pro-lifers in the pro-life caucus. I just really hope that the pro-life caucus starts acting like the Quebec caucus in the next parliament, and on some of these issues, really, really hold the cabinet to their feet to the fire and say, "Listen, this is where people are at, and either you let us have this vote, and not get in the way, or come budget time, I don't know if I'm going to vote, if I'm even going to show up."
Nature communicates with us in a universal language. The sunrise starts a new day. The sunset marks our accomplishments.
The most beautiful communication is where the speaker and the listener match perfectly and understand the same message.
Your future audience is waiting to hear from you. What message do you need to share?
At LaRosse Media, we fashion beautiful communications through our professional video production services and marketing strategies.
Create your own most beautiful message. Visit larosmedia.com and be sure to check out our extended service options.
Dream, produce, market, succeed with LaRosse Media.
Serving Canada from coast to coast to coast.
So like we were saying, snow in Calgary, snow in Brandon, it's supposed to warm up. So you know that it is NHL Stanley Cup playoff time.
Mm-hmm.
And our teams
hate it when we talk about sports. You can just turn off the podcast now.
Yeah.
We'll not blame you, and we'll see you next time. But
I had a financial investor of ours, one of our many monthly ones, and God bless her, she's from Alberta. She said, "I love your guys' podcast, but I just kind of skipped through like the first 10 minutes or whatever, because you guys just talk about sports." So we saved it for the last 10 minutes, maybe longer. We'll see. This might be the longest segment, but
my opinions are pretty boring, but go ahead.
Well, I thought mine were pretty spicy, and then I went through it. I'm like, holy crap! I chose literally the home team in every series. But anyway, why don't we start with the Eastern Conference? How's that sound?
Perfect.
Okay, we go series by series.
Yep.
Okay, all right. Let's start with the Battle of Florida first. Tampa Bay and the Florida.
I would have way more preferred to see Tampa Bay and the Bruins. I think that would have been a great matchup. But I have to go with the Panthers.
Yeah, I think so.
So
I have Panthers 4-2.
Yeah. Oh, we actually just guessed the. Oh well, I
just put numbers there. I don't think.
Okay.
I know we did this last year, and I was massively off. So here we go again. Our favorite series, your favorite series, hasn't happened since 1959. Boston and Toronto, the Bees and the Leafs.
They're gonna sweep the Leafs.
I don't think it's gonna be that. Come on.
They just are. It's just gonna happen. It's just the way that it is, and I've accepted that.
Thing to me, like, Boston obviously isn't as good as it was last year. Actually, I was looking at I was listening to one of the podcasts when I went for my walk today, and I didn't realize that both Allmark and Swayman have not really that good of save percentages. They're both just over
This is
900.
the thing, though. This is what I keep telling my husband, who tells me all these things. Oh, Boston doesn't have as much depth. Their goalie isn't as good. They lost some of their best players. Blah blah blah. It doesn't matter. Like you can compare every single player. 69 goals, whatever. Blah blah blah. And it doesn't matter. It's just the fact that Boston is in the Leafs' head. They always have and always will be. We didn't beat them at all, not once this whole entire season. And we can't beat them in the playoffs. It's just the way that it is. It's the way that God has willed it. So we just all need to accept it and move on.
It's despite the Boston, like you said. I was going to say, what I was trying to make the case is that the Boston's obviously worse this year. It's still a great team,
of course.
but obviously
Yeah.
worse.
And they've been worse going into the playoffs. So have the Leafs, to be honest.
I was going to say, even though Boston is worse, so is Toronto.
Yeah,
I think Toronto's worse this year than they were last year in terms of a team. Like I think the depth of their team isn't as good. I think that their top guys are a little bit better than they were last year, but oftentimes, unfortunately, they don't show up in the playoffs. The only guy that was really
better
heating up.
goaltending. But
Yeah, but even the goaltending in Toronto is still worse than Boston.
it is
Even
bad,
though,
but it's better.
yeah. Like that's an actual controversy though in Toronto.
Well, I mean, the whole controversy is that we have four main guys who get paid trillions of dollars,
Yep.
and they get re-signed, and we have no other money, and they just
Yep.
continue to build this team around these four guys, but we continuously get in third. We lose in the first round of the playoffs or
Yep.
the second round, I guess. So there's no like moving forward. There's no plan. So I don't know where they're gonna go, and this is just like a recurring thing.
It's like Shanny just thinks that the cap doesn't exist, or
Yeah.
like that it doesn't matter.
They gotta get rid of somebody. Like they can't just keep having these like 4 or 5 guys over and over and over again.
I thought the four of them might get together and say, guys, listen, let's all just make 10, like an even 10. Everybody sign for like 4 or 5 years, and then that frees up. Like if they all made 10, that would free up another $7 million between the four of them to get someone like, I don't mean to throw guys under the bus, but like other than Bertuzzi or Domi, you know what I mean? Like
Although I do appreciate those guys because we are
Yeah,
such rookies that it's nice to have some like meat on the team.
Yeah, like or like on the
And
back.
Domi, that's like having a Ginla Calgary get drafted next season, whatever his name is, the Sun. So
Yeah.
you gotta have the Suns come play. But
It's like Shane Doan's son, and Shane Doan's first year with the Jets they moved, and now his son's first year with the Coyotes they moved. Okay, I have Boston over Toronto 4-3. I think it's going to go to 7 again, and I think it's going to end in Boston.
oh, actually, the sweetest victory would be if that was the case, and then Boston was down, or Boston was winning like 5-0, and then
and then the comeback
just
happened.
paid ultimate payback, which will never happen. But I do want to say, like, I lived in Toronto in 2013 when that Game 7 happened, and it wasn't right now yet. So I was working for another pro life organization. I forget where I was.
You were in Brandon.
In Brandon, was I?
You were in Brandon. Yep. For game.
So I was
I don't
coming
know if you
home.
were in Brandon for game 7, but you were in Brandon for one of the games in those series. No, it wasn't game 7. You were back in Toronto for game 7. Yeah.
I was gone somewhere, and so I just remember that I got on the plane, and the plane is obviously going to Toronto, so it's like the game 7 just started. So everyone's super pumped. Everybody has it on their phones. That even the pilots like going over the thing, going like, "Oh, it's 4-1 or 3-1, 3-0, 4-1 or whatever," and telling us that everyone's cheering and stuff. And then we're like slowly flying back to Toronto, and he's giving up. It was the most depressing flight ever. It was like, it's now 4-2, now it's 4-3, and then we land. And he's like, it is now tied. Going into overtime, I get off the flight and I'm in my Uber. The Uber guy is like listening to it. And I knew by the time that it goes into overtime, like, you're not winning this game. Like, you've
the big MO is, yeah.
So I was just like praying to God that my Uber driver would get to my apartment on time because I legit thought there would be riots in Toronto. Like, not going to be good. This is not going to be good at all. I'm not going to be stuck in it. But it was just like the most bizarre flight ever, and it was just so depressing. Like it started off so good, and oh man, what a time to be alive.
You don't honestly think it's going to be a sweep, though, do you?
Yes. I
Wow.
think that they just have our number.
I will say this one negative thing about Toronto is that they have only 26 regulation wins. They've been overtime merchants, and that's a huge red flag to me because you don't have 3-on-3 overtime in the
Yeah.
playoffs. It's 5-on-5.
Yeah, Aaron, my husband was like, okay, like there's a game tomorrow night, then there's a game Monday, and then Thursday or something, and then Saturday. Saturday is game four, like a week from tomorrow. And he's like, let's get a babysitter and go out on Saturday. And I'm like, I'm
No,
like, if they have won those three games, I am not going to spend money and watch it anywhere like on Saturday.
he's gonna
So
get a babysitter for you, and he's gonna go. Yeah.
if they
Okay, let's
win
move
one
on.
game, I'll go out and to watch it. But if they just have not won and they're just clearly losing, I don't even know if I'll even continue to watch it. It'll just be so depressing.
Yeah, yeah.
I expect that to happen.
I think Boston is bad enough that Toronto can win a few games in there, if that makes any sense. Not so much that Toronto's good enough that you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I mean,
I
we'll
mean, if
see.
that loophole team can like beat them, then this team certainly can, because that was a terrible team.
Yeah.
But
And Boston last year, they were up 3-1 in the series, I
oh yeah,
think.
last year they should have won the cup, so that was just wild. Like that was just insane. But I think I think that they'll beat the Leafs, but I think they won't beat the Panthers. So we'll see what
Yeah,
happens.
yeah. Okay, moving on to
But I think
the
the Leafs could have beat the Panthers, to be honest. Like again, even though statistically it's like the Panthers are so much better than the Leafs, if you look at how they play against each other, we were always better than them. We beat them almost every game. So I was, even though they're much better in general, and they were
that.
doing better near the
Listen,
end for
but that
sure.
was up to Toronto. That was up to Toronto. You beat Florida the last game, and it wasn't even a close game. They lost 5-2. You beat Florida that game. You play Florida.
Yeah.
It's
They just kind of gave up. And anyways,
yeah. Okay, we'll move on to the next division. New York and Washington.
yeah,
Washington barely got in. By the way,
yeah,
this is a fascinating story to me.
yeah.
This podcast is way too long. So there are four teams vying for that last wild card spot, which was Washington, and it went right to game 82. And Washington was playing Philadelphia in Philadelphia. In order for Philadelphia to have a chance at getting into the playoff, that wild card spot, they had to beat Washington in regulation. Couldn't go to overtime, had to go to regulation, and Detroit had to lose to Montreal in regulation. It was 4-3 for Montreal. There were 7 seconds left in the game. Detroit had an offensive zone face-off. Puck drops, gets back to the point or the line, one of the two. Clap bomb, 3 seconds left. They tie it up. So right there, even though Detroit doesn't have to win the game, right at that moment, Philadelphia has been eliminated from the playoffs. John Tortorella, the head coach for the Flyers, says, and I believe him, didn't have that information on the bench. Yeah. They still thought they were in it.
Yeah.
But deep into the third period, 1-1 tie, Philly needs to win this in regulation. What do? They pull the goalie to get the extra guy on the ice. Mm-hmm. And Florida is paying attention to this. Literally, that was like, Detroit's paying attention to this literally for those like 5 minutes in between the end of the third and overtime begins. And nothing's happened in Philly. As overtime expires in Montreal or in Detroit, Washington gets the empty net goal. Philadelphia has been eliminated, but Detroit has been eliminated as well, even though they won in the shootout. And when you watch the replay of the shootout, and I forget who won the shootout for them, it was like I think it was Patrick Kane. It was like the most like dour looking team that's ever won a shootout game in NHL history, because they knew that no matter what they did, that they were already eliminated.
Like kept winning, and they just barely were scraping by, but they were like,
it was a miracle. It was 3 miracle
Yeah.
Got it to overtime one, got to overtime one, got to overtime
Yeah.
and one, and
Even Toronto, I was like, kind of like, okay, it's like good for you.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So, anyways, I have the Rangers winning this series
Oh yeah.
1.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. This one's kind of interesting because normally I would say that New York, the Islanders, are coming in really like wouldn't have a chance against Carolina, but they're coming in really, really hot. They're the only team in the NHL in the last 10 that are hotter than the Jets. They're 8-1-1 in the last 10 games, which is unbelievable to end the year. However, when I was looking through who they're playing, there was only one, I believe, one team out of those 10 that they played that was above the playoff line. Two, sorry, there was one team that played them twice, and that was New York, the Rangers, and I think they beat them once and then lost to them in a shootout. But every other team that they beat, um, were all below playoff line. So anyway, I have Carolina winning this one. How
Yeah.
about you?
Yeah.
But I
Thinking,
have them winning 4-2 because even though you don't create your schedule, you have to play the teams in front of you. You
do you
still
think
have to.
anyone will get swept?
I don't have anyone getting swept. Like if anyone's going to get swept, I think it's going to happen in the East. Sure as hell don't think it's going to happen in the West.
Oilers?
I don't think so. So let's go to the West. Dallas.
I think Dallas is going to win the cup.
You think Dallas is going to win the cup? Okay, I have Dallas beating Vegas 4-2 in that series. I know people are getting healthy in Vegas. I know that Mark Stone magically, resurrects with Jesus everywhere around Easter to come back and play for the Golden Knights. But
He's a deeply religious man, Scott.
it's great. He's a fellow Manitoban. But I don't think it's going to work this time for Vegas. I think they're limping into the playoffs. They barely made the playoffs. Dallas is looking scary. Dallas is looking real good. Ottinger's now looking like Ottinger again. So yeah, I think Dallas takes that one 4-2. Winnipeg and Colorado.
I mean, the Jets, of course. I don't have a underdog winner. So I just think that the home teams will win. So
Which case,
just based on, pardon?
in this case, it's the Jets.
Oh, the Jets are higher than the
Jets are number 4 in the league. They're number 2 in the division. They're number 2 in the conference. They beat Colorado 4-2, 6-2, 7-0. They beat them 7-0 on Saturday. And yeah, they have home ice.
Oh, okay. And the Jets. I went through this with my husband, so he thought Colorado, but
Colorado's limping into it. It's two very, very different teams. The Jets are the stingiest team in the NHL. They've won the Jennings Trophy, which means that they've allowed the fewest number of goals. They're the only team to allow less than 200 goals this year in the NHL.
and didn't he win your goalie win a trophy, whatever?
Well, that's the first one he wins, and then he'll probably win the Vezina Trophy as well for best goalie. They have the obviously they have the lowest goals against. There is not one forward on that team that doesn't have double-digit goals from Winnipeg. So they don't necessarily have a star like Nathan McKinnon or Nico Ratinen. But they're also much, much deeper. So my thing is that if the Adam Lowry line,
Moneyball.
Pardon me?
It's like Moneyball. There's no
Exactly. And you look at Vegas last year. I don't think Vegas had a 40 goal scorer last year, but they had like 6, 7, 8, 9 guys that had 20 goals, right? Depth.
Yeah.
And this is something you're talking about the Leafs, right? It's all.
It's funny. They showed like the stats of all the basically the last like 4 or 5 NHLers who got 69 over 65 goals in a season. None of them even remotely close to the cup. So
President's Trophy winners, which Dallas isn't. It's New York this year. Dallas getting run for their money. That's the curse, right? President's Trophy winner hasn't won Stanley Cup in, I think, decades at this point. There's been a few, a lot more than President's Trophy winners. Jennings Trophy winners that have won the Stanley Cup in the last 20 years because, as the old adage works in football, I think it works in hockey that defense wins championships. So I have Winnipeg beating Colorado 4-2. I don't think that Winnipeg could sweep Colorado because of that line that you have. Like it's going to be tough to shut that line down completely for 4 games. Then again, they did for 3 games during the regular season, but regular season's different than the playoffs. So Winnipeg is the second hottest team. They're 8-2, 8-2-0 going into the playoffs in the last 10, winning their last 8 of 8. Colorado's 5-4-1. They have some real rough games in the last little bit, but playoffs are a different beast. So this one I also might be a little bit spicy. Vancouver, Nashville.
That's what my husband said. He was like pretty, but I'm gonna go with Vancouver. I mean, he's
I'm
just
going with
biased.
Vancouver
He's
too, but like,
Vancouver.
do you have like how many games? Do you think
No,
the
this
Nashville?
is just like solely my gut and watching like basic stats come through my social media. Like I don't know, it's just my general feeling. It is based on it's pure conjecture. It's not based on any stats whatsoever.
I think Vancouver's going to win it. This series. I think they're going to win it 4-3. I think this one's going to go to 7. And the reason I think it's going to go to 7 is because Vancouver and Nashville both have very similar records going into in their last 10 games. They have very similar records going into the playoffs. Nashville's 4-5-1, Vancouver's 5-4-1, right? So they're basically 1 game off from one another. Um, Vancouver has showed up for some really big games. They beat Edmonton, which mattered for that, for getting seeding and home ice advantage should Vancouver and Edmonton meet each other in round 2, which I have happening. But Nashville's been to the playoffs a few times. They have UC Soros, they have Roman Yossi, and they have a really good forward group. They had that crazy run of 19 straight games where they got a point. You just tell a bunch of guys that no, we're canceling your tickets to go see U2 in the Sphere in Vegas, and then lo and behold, that's all you need to do to get to the playoffs. So they definitely have cooled down, but I think they're more evenly matched because Nashville has kind of they got Ryan O'Reilly, for example, right? The guy kind of he won a Stanley Cup not that long ago. He was great, I think, phenomenal for you guys in the playoffs last year.
Crazy eyes.
I I would have dropped one of the core 4 to keep Ryan O'Reilly. Like I would have got him over Reeves, right? Like that would have been way more of a priority anyway. Um, so I think that series is going to go to 4-3. I think that series is going to be closer than a lot of people think, but we'll see. This one you have a sweep, Edmonton, LA.
I think the Oilers will definitely win, and I like I know my husband hates me for saying this, but I really like have a soft spot for the Oilers, and I really want to see McDavid win a cup, like real bad, and I was really rooting for them to get to whatever number of games they needed to break the record. I'm like totally blanking right now. Was it seven? Was it
18. They needed
17?
18 straight wins, and I think they got
Yeah.
17 to tie. Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, they're like, they had a big streak and you got the best player in the league, and that's got to mean something. So I really hope that even if they don't win the Stanley Cup, to at least win like their division championship, whatever.
I
So
think I think I think they're going to beat LA. I think it's going to be 4-2 because if this comes with an asterisk, if the Los Angeles Kings play the way they were playing at the beginning of the year, which is a little bit like Winnipeg, very stifling, very forward pressure. They're not as crazy as the Jets in that they have a 5. The Jets play under Rick Bowness, and that's why they have slumps in the middle of the year because it's very tiring. Basically, all 5 guys, all 5 skaters act as forwards, and then when the puck goes the other way, all 5 guys come back and act as D-men, right? And they often spring from what they call springing from below the red line, right? You'll have 2 or 3 guys. Once you want to break out of your zone and you have control of the puck, you start below your own goal line, and then away you go. LA plays a very similar type of game, or they can at least. Um, I hate to say it, but if Pierre Luc Dubois actually wakes up and decides that he wants to be an NHL player again, and does that in the playoffs, I think he has the ability to put a team like LA on his back and get a couple of goals and get a couple of wins. But LA to me is a little bit like Colorado in that they have terrible goaltending. Although Skinner didn't look that great for Edmonton the other night with Colorado. I think Edmonton takes it 4-2. I think we
I think
see Edmonton.
everyone's gonna take it 4-2.
What's
I think
that?
that was like literally every single.
Florida 4-2, Boston 4-3, New York 4-1, Carolina 4-2, Dallas 4-2, Winnipeg 4-2, Vancouver 4-3, Edmonton 4-2. So 1, 2, 3. Like half of them, just over half of them I have 4-2, but
Oh,
playing
my
it.
heart can't take his 7 games just to lose it. So I hope you're wrong there.
I think the Oilers are like Toronto and a little bit like what Colorado is now. I think you have too much money on one line. I think Edmonton has more depth than Toronto, and I think they have a bit of a better decor. But it's not enough, I don't think, to win a cup.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
You
think they're a
look up,
better duo than we have.
yeah. I'm trying to think of like the last team that's won a cup that's basically relied on one like superstar line. And
But no one's
Tampa
been like
Bay,
a David other than like Gretzky. He's in a
yeah, but I
different.
mean that's decades ago now, right? So, and
I can't
that's
believe
without a
he scored 92 goals in one season. That's just insane. I'm still
yeah,
like flabbergasted by that.
we're not going to
Can you
see.
imagine living through that? That would just be, yeah, that would be wild. But anyway,
Well, I mean, you did. It was the 80s.
well, I mean, like actually paying attention.
You were born
Yeah.
under Reagan.
Well,
Anyway,
Aaron
that
might
is
actually
our
pay
playoff
attention.
preview. Can't wait to see how incredibly wrong we are.
Yeah. I mean, we'll probably be mostly right.
I
Yeah,
think
for
we're
the
going to be
first
mostly right
round,
this time.
anyways. We
Yeah,
should do it for the second round. Then
we totally
that'll
should.
be more spicy.
Yeah, that would be more like, do you choose Edmonton, Vancouver? Do you choose
Yeah.
Winnipeg or Dallas? Holy crap, Winnipeg or Dallas? That would be a bloodbath. That would be a.
But yeah, I always like a good upset, so I hope at least somebody does it. Um,
I think Toronto losing 4-3 in a way would be an upset.
no. It would be deja vu, not an upset. Just it doesn't matter where they are in the rankings. It's just that's always what because I think like throughout the different playoffs history when they've played them, they've either Toronto's been higher or Boston's. It doesn't matter. It's always the same outcome. So
Yeah, yeah, it's just one of those things. Hey, but you know, in all those years in the 70s, I think 80s and before, Boston, they can never get to the cup because of Montreal, right?
there you
Because Toronto was in the West and they were in the East.
That's one thing I like about the potentiality of a Utah team in that hopefully they do kind of switch up the divisions and switch up the teams. See, I think that would be good because like we've a lot every year it's similar. So yeah,
I think there's more opportunity to do that in the East because you have so many teams that are so close together.
yeah,
Because what the NHL's done so they could get the TV deals is they try to do their sports divisions following time zones, right, for TV purposes. And I think that's really smart. So I think in the West is kind of hard to change whether, you know, you have a team in Utah or
true.
not, Salt Lake City or not. But I think in the East there's a lot more opportunity to change things around.
I actually personally love living in the West, rooting for an East team because I
So
like
early.
I love it. It's like I can
Yeah.
actually yeah pay
Really
attention and
happy
not
to be back home here in Manitoba, right in the middle, because it's pretty even, right? It's not crazy early for me. Like some of those Saturday afternoon games would be literally in the morning for you when they play in like Washington or Carolina in the afternoon, like at noon their time. But at the same time, if I have a 7:30 start local time in San Jose, I'm not in Ontario anymore waiting for a 10:30 puck drop. Like 9:30 is late enough, sure, but I'm still going to bed by midnight type thing. So
and
I
like
kind of
there's
get it all in Manitoba with sports, and that goes
I
for
also
football and everything too.
yeah, and even though I live in Calgary, like there are tons of Leafs fans here, so it's always be playing on in every pub, and there's a good amount of Leafs fans in the pubs and stuff. So it's a good mix, and I enjoy it. Will you go? Do you think we'll to go out and watch it? It's always like more fun to go watch it in the
I'm not gonna lie to you, I was looking at tickets today, but they sold out way too fast. Even for the street party, they sold out way too fast. So it's something that it's not inexpensive, right? But especially when Winnipeg gets to the second round, especially if they go to the conference final, they
oh
get
yeah.
against both Colorado and Dallas. then
Yeah.
I'm willing to probably buy a
That's
ticket
like
for.
Aaron. My husband, he's like, there's no amount of money if they,
Yeah,
it's because it's a once in a lifetime thing and it's an experience. And so I'm glad that Calgary's not in it because it's hard
we
when Calgary is in the playoffs and the Leafs. It's like every day there's a game. It's
let,
stressful.
let me ask you this then, right? Let's say the Leafs, if the Leafs make it past Boston, what do they got Florida
Could
after
you
that?
imagine how expensive Leafs tickets would be if they made it to the even like past the second round? Like tens of thousands of dollars. Like it would be insane. Like I'd have to like get a second mortgage on the
Obviously,
house.
you should mortgage your house, and then
Yeah.
we need to do a lot of fundraising for right now.
Yeah. Send Alyssa to Toronto,
Yeah, yeah,
not for a pro-life talk, but to watch the Leafs game. Yeah.
exactly.
But it's fun to watch Leafs games in Toronto. Like the experience is by far the best than anywhere else I've ever watched. Just the excitement and how packed it is, especially the closer to the arena you get.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah.
good
Like
time.
Jack Astor's there would or Loose Moose actually is a really good place to watch Leafs games.
Yeah.
It's just down the street.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
it's
we'll
fun.
see what happens. But yeah, this is like the least excited I've been for playoffs in a
I
long
can't,
time.
I can't, I cannot believe that they didn't beat Florida that game. Like, I don't know. Like you like the thing with Florida last year is you beat like you got the one game with them, right? Like they lost 4-1 in that series. Am I wrong?
Oh, I can't remember. I think I stopped paying attention or
Because
caring. Yeah.
did Tampa go to game seven?
No, I think it went to game six.
Game six. That was done in game six. They won that 4-2. And I think they won one of the games with Florida. Anyway, my point being is that you know your history of Boston. Um, and you have at least one win against Florida. And like you said, during the regular season, not too bad. So I don't know. I just thought they would put more of an effort into it. Um, I
Yeah,
don't
I
know.
think that like if they had a
You're
better
gonna have to play Boston anyway, I guess. Like you'd have to play. They would have to play Boston in round one, or if they caught past Florida in round one, Boston's.
I don't
You're
know.
right. Boston Tampa is more of an interesting series, but does it really matter? Like you finally beat Tampa in a
It's
series,
just
but
it's more of a mentality thing than anything else. It's just yeah, and they really get in your head and if you look at all the chats too and all the different Facebook groups or social media groups that we're in that I'm in with regards to the Leafs, everybody says the same thing. Like it's just it's very depressing. And I think if
we
Matthews had
want
gotten his
Florida.
70 if Matthews had gotten his 70 or if they had a better streak going into the playoffs or something, maybe they would have had a bit of a high, but it's just like all sort of depressing.
To
So,
me, I'd feel more confident about Toronto, even if they didn't have a great, even though Matthews didn't get his 70, even though, which by the way, he's a much better defensive player than a lot of the others that are going for the Hart Trophy. Um, or let's say they had, I don't know what the record is, but let's say it's 5-4-1 or something like that, or 6-3, 6-3-1. Uh, I would feel much better about Toronto if they had not won so many of their games on 3-on-3 in overtime. Like to me, that's just like empty carbs, empty calories.
yeah.
That's a big danger. But yeah. Anyway, this podcast has gone on long enough. It's like an
Yeah.
hour and a half.
But we'll know a lot. We'll know, well, yeah, we'll know basically who won the next podcast, like in 2 weeks. So
Yeah, we basically follow all the rounds. So
yeah.
we built the podcast around us.
Just just change the whole concept of the podcast now. Um,
I'm
but yeah,
down.
we thank you guys for listening, and we'll know you. We know that you'll be in deep anticipation of our next NHL predictions for the playoffs, and make sure that you like and subscribe so you can get those Stanley Cup predictions or those NHL predictions, and we'll
Hey,
see
do
you
you
next
think we could get one of those like really annoying sports betting companies to advertise with us?
time. No.
For all our degenerate supporters and listeners and viewers. I should call our supporters degenerate anglers.
All right, we'll talk to you guys soon. Thanks for joining us.
Bye for now.